Welcome back to Beta Accounting Tutor. Today we'll be discussing the equivalent unit schedule. Now when we're thinking about equivalent unit schedule, you're probably used to something like this, where it shows you the beginning, started and completed, completed and transferred out, your ending inventory, and then total. So we'll go over this. It is important to note that what you started may not necessarily be what you started and completed. Let's think about this. Suppose you work at a factory where you put covers on erasers. And on Monday, you go into work and you're like, you know what? I'm going to put covers on 100 erasers today. So you pick up 100 erasers. And you start working, but you run out of time and you only manage to put covers on 80 erasers. So at the end of your day, you would still have 20 of these left over. So in this case, you would have started 100, but you would have only started and completed 80, and your ending inventory would be 20. Similarly to completed and transferred out, beginning and started and completed. So the next day, you go into work and you still have your 20 erasers that you didn't cover from Monday. So that is your beginning inventory. So you tell yourself, well, today I'm going to work extra hard. I'm going to finish these and then I'm going to do 100 more. So your beginning inventory will be 20. And if you succeed, you'll have completed and transferred out 120. However, you will have only started and completed 100 because the 20 that came from yesterday were started yesterday, and you started and completed 100. So if you notice, on Monday you started 100, but you still had 20 left over in the ending, meaning that you started and completed 80. So now, if we stick to Monday, you will have completed and transferred out 80, and because it's Monday, you will have had none in your beginning inventory. Do you kind of see where I'm going? Now if we look at Tuesday, so on Tuesday, you will have started 100 because you had 20 from yesterday that we do not count because you didn't start them today. And because you finished all your work on Tuesday, you will have 0 in your ending inventory. Therefore, you will have started and completed 100 on Tuesday. So if we look at 100 here, and if we look at the 20 erasers that were in your beginning inventory because you didn't finish them on Monday, we can figure out that you completed and transferred out 120 on Tuesday. Alright, so we've discussed the left column of the equivalent unit schedule. Now let's look at the top row. Your top row normally has the total units, your direct materials, it could be 1 or it could be 2 or more, and then your conversion cost. Now direct material is simple enough. It's what goes into actually making your product. What is conversion cost? Conversion cost can be thought of as the cost required to Conversion cost can be thought of as what it costs you to convert your direct materials into your finished goods. If we're talking about, say, cupcakes, just adding your flour and frosting and water and yeast will not make you cupcakes. You need to take time, work the dough, and put it in the oven. So let's look at an example. Suppose you're working at a cookie factory and you make frosted cookies, and we're going to do an equivalent unit schedule for the baking department. Now there are 2 different types of direct materials, dough and frosting. Dough is added 100% at the beginning of the process. Frosting is added 100% at the end of the process. Conversion cost, which in this case would be considered time in the oven, is applied evenly throughout the process. And unlike in real life, we'll say cookies can be baked partially to be finished later. Alright, so we'll say there are 100 cookies in your beginning inventory that are 40% complete. What's important to note here is that your equivalent unit schedule is only concerned with this period. So what we're going to do is we're going to write down your 100 cookies in your beginning inventory. And where do we go from here? Now, your dough is added 100% at the beginning of the process. So you might be tempted to write 100 here, however, you'd be wrong. Because dough is added 100% at the beginning of the process, you actually add none in this period. So we're going to write 0 here. However, because frosting is added 100% at the end of the process, 100% of the frosting for these 100 cookies are going to be added during this period. Now, conversion cost. These cookies are 40% complete, which means 60% of the conversion cost has to be added this period. So 60% of 100 is 60. Now let's look at some other information. It says here that we completed and transferred out 150 cookies this period. So let's look at that. One thing you need to know here is that your beginning and your started and completed adds to completed and transferred out. So started and completed is pretty easy to figure out here. It's going to be 150 minus 100, which is 50. And because started and completed implies that these cookies were started and completed in this period, every direct material and all of the conversion costs were added this period as well. So all of the dough for 50 cookies and all of the frosting for 50 cookies and all of the conversion costs for 50 cookies were added this period. And we're just going to add them down. Also, your ending inventory, let's say there are 20 cookies in your ending inventory that are 80% complete. So we're going to put 20 in the ending inventory. And because they're 80% complete, but dough is added 100% at the beginning of the process, that means all the dough for these 20 cookies were added already during this period. So we're going to write the 20 here. And because they're not 100% complete and frosting is added at the end of the process, none of the frosting should have been added yet. So we're going to write 0. And because they're 80% complete as far as conversion cost is concerned, 80% of 20 cookies implies that there were 16 cookies worth of conversion costs applied this period. And for your total, we're just going to add them down. Make sure you remember that it's only the last 2 rows that are added down, not the whole table. These 2 rows have already been added together to form this one. So let's add down. Alright, so before we finish, there's a couple things that I want to point out. First, it's important to note that the units here isn't ounces or pounds or even inches. It's actually cookies. That's what makes the equivalent unit schedule so interesting. It converts everything by the unit that we are working with for the finished product. So what this says here is total is easy. We have 100 cookies, 50 cookies, so on and so forth. Dough, this 50 here does not imply that 50 pounds or $50 worth of dough was added in. It's actually 50 cookies worth of dough. Similarly, this would be 100 cookies worth of frosting that we had to add. And the conversion cost implies that 60 cookies worth of baking were done to these 100 cookies because they were already 40% complete. And in total, we put in 126 cookies worth of conversion costs this period. Well, I hope you enjoyed this episode of Beta Accounting Tutor, and we'll see you next time. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you.